unfortunately, I do have to still do an introduction to these specific playlists, just in case someone doesn't watch the general lessons playlist. You know, this is quite important to know this if you haven't watched that. So if you have, just don't watch this and move on to the next one. But if you haven't watched it, this is some really important information, basic information about these mythical creatures and kind of my spin on it. So basically, it can be set into two different categories. Modern paganism, you really don't believe that they exist unless it's in the spirit realm. And then ancient or ancestral paganism, you do believe that they can possibly exist in the physical realm in addition to the spirit realm. So basically, that's the main difference. We both believe in them usually in one way or another. We just depends on where you think they can exist, on what plane of existence you think they can exist. So I teach the ancestral ancient paganism, so I am going to be talking about the physical realm, these creatures potentially existing in the physical realm also. I'll say this right off the bat, if you really start to think about it, it really starts to make you wonder, but the problem is that we don't ever really think about it. If you sit down and think, okay, so a long time ago, before we had boats that could travel around the world, before we had planes, before we had any way of knowing, you know, what said person over here was doing on one side of the earth and what other people were doing on the other side of the earth, before we even knew that there were people over there, you know, because we couldn't travel there, we couldn't physically travel there, there were still countless different people in all corners of the earth that somehow independently were seeing and describing the same sorts of things. Dragons are a really good example, because in almost every corner of the world there is a quite distinguished depiction of what a dragon looks like and what it is. It does differ a little bit, like if it's European versus Asiatic, you do see a little bit of difference there, but no one sees so much of a difference that they can't still say, oh yeah, that's a dragon. Still looks like a dragon, still got same kind of folklore around it. Some of the individual stories and individual, you know, folklore might be different, but all in all, you have someone sketching out a dragon, totally unaware that someone on the opposite side of the world from them is also sketching out a dragon. And then you have this happening like everywhere, and almost all corners of the earth, spontaneously, with no one knowing that there are other people out there seeing it on the other side of the earth, because they didn't have a way to get there for this tale to travel, for this tale to travel, you know, from one part of the world to another would be one thing, but that's not what it's doing. These people are just seeing things randomly, independently of one another, not even knowing the other person even exists at all. So if they're all independently seeing the same sorts of things, and if it's not a dragon, then what the fuck are they seeing? A lot of these things are too physical in nature. A lot of these stories, and I'm not talking about the outlandishly theatrical large fish stories, I'm talking about the kind of, you know, I'm not talking about the sailor stories, I'm talking about the kind that might actually have some truth to it, that's not over exaggerated. And a lot of those just throughout history seem way too physical to just all be spirits that showed themselves to people. It just has too much of a physical sense to it for all of them to all have been only spirits. And if you think about it, most things in the spirit realm, if not on Earth, somewhere in some planet, probably did live on a physical plane of existence at one time. And I don't know for sure because it's a really vast place, but I would imagine that if not most, at least a lot of those spirits in the spirit realm had a physical body that looked just like their spiritual body. They're, you know, it'd be difficult to imagine why would they look like that otherwise. But then you take into account that maybe some of these things haven't ever lived in the physical realm. I don't know. I just think that with what we have, with what we've believed over the past thousands and thousands of years of existence versus the past 200 or 150 or so, you know, we've got 150 or so not believing in it, and then we've got the rest of our literal human existence, thousands and thousands of years that we did believe in it. It's only very, very, very recently in human history that we stopped believing in these kinds of really obvious, tangible, physically obvious types of magic, including things like these creatures and mythical creatures. And whilst that pattern is a bit, well, it's a lot actually relative to the history of paganism and how a lot of that knowledge just kind of died out with us. We're not the only ones that started dying out. You know, witches are not the only things that were hunted. Unfortunately, Abrahamic religions called them demonic beasts and other types of things. And a lot of times for those demonic beasts, there was much more of a bounty than for just a witch, because a lot of times they saw those demonic beasts as something that was even more powerful a lot of times than just a regular old witch. And so they would seek them out and hunt them just like they would us. The only difference between the way we hid and the way they hid was that we hid through you know, not teaching that really obvious magic to our children, and or it simply just dying and that magic dying out with us. And they hid by hiding their physical selves from the world instead of hiding just who they were. They hid their physical selves from the world. How do you tell something that's been living out in the forests like that, well, nowadays they don't hang witches, but we don't really know, they don't really fully accept us either. And they might, if you revealed yourself, they might accept you, but we don't know, because we really don't know how they would react to, if think about this, if the whole world knew that, for example, a dragon existed, would they react in a similar light? They don't even know, really. A lot of people think that, I mean, they know that people practice witchcraft and paganism and all sorts, but they don't really believe that magic, even that magic exists. So if they really had solid evidence, if the entire world had something that was so obvious that it was solid evidence, right, and everyone knew it to be true, would we just revert back to 250 years ago, where everything is getting hunted again, when we're hunted again, not just, you know, I don't know the answer to that. And so you'd imagine that they have found a way not only to hide with just your typical camouflage and hiding under behind things. They've not only done that, but they've gone above and beyond that. You have to imagine that they've gone above and beyond that into actually using magic, like cloaking magic and things like that, to actually basically make themselves either invisible or set up some kind of illusion to make them appear ordinary or not there or something. Or you would have found them by now. You know, you would have found a lot of people would have found, not just a few people saying that they saw something, but like everyone would have found him by now. So there has to be a magical way that they're hiding themselves. The things that were targeted were the things that looked a little different, looked more menacing usually. Cute little fox out in the woods, even though they were given their own fair share of unfortunate reputation, they weren't targeted nearly as much because they didn't look threatening, you know. So that's kind of where I'm coming at with this. That's the way I'm looking at it, and you almost have to think, if I'll say this, used to be a complete skeptic, and if I hadn't found at least some evidence, the evidence I have seen hasn't been so brutally obvious and outstanding to be, you know, impressive, but it's been enough that I can't ignore, especially with me not being the only one that saw something, that I can't ignore that it might actually exist. And that was what forced me into believing. And before, I was really a very harsh skeptic, not only of stuff like that, but of just even the most basic of basic magic. I was skeptic to. It literally had to be thrown in my face many, many times. And had I not had that thrown in my face, would I ever even think about it being possible, or would I just laugh? And I'm thinking I'd probably just laugh. So I understand where the skeptics are coming from, because I used to be one. But at the same time, you know, this really isn't for people who want to stay a skeptic. This is for people who are looking for answers. And I'll tell you right now, you probably, most of what you're going to encounter is in the spirit realm, either when you're asleep and you're dreaming, or when you're through astral projection or something like that, because most of them, they don't reveal themselves in the physical realm for just any reason. It has to be a really, really, really profound reason, and also to someone that they trust. And so it's very rare that they would, even if they do reveal themselves, a lot of times other people will be around and they only give a little hint of something, because they're only trying to reveal themselves to one individual, and there's all these other people around. But again, it's usually, if you're going to find some kind of evidence, usually minimal. You're usually not going to see like the entire thing out there nowadays, because they do stay hidden so much. But it's not that you won't ever see it, it's just that they're so elusive, you know. So yeah, so that's basically just the gist of it. We'll have specific creatures in each video, so each video will have its own creature that we focus on. And just because I don't focus on something doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means that I don't know enough about it, or I just don't have time to do them all. I'm really going to focus on the ones that I know the most about, and that's what I'm going to focus on. It's going to take a while to get them all up. It's also going to take a while to get all the other specific sections up. I want to do a bunch of different sections, like, you know, in a bunch of different specific, like shape-shifting, telepathy, healing magic, protection magic, you know, to really, I don't know exactly which ones I'm going to do, but I do know that there's going to be a lot. So just please bear with me as I try to get this channel up and running. It's brand new and it takes a long time to get a lot of this stuff up, so please just be patient.